Hi guys, welcome back to Chess the Matthew. So on this video, we will tackle about the shortest game of the Filipino woman grandmaster Janelle Mipraina versus Irene Karisma Sukandar. So their opening battlefield start with the move knight f3 and knight c6, and later on they transposed it into the English opening. So after knight f3, in which this game was actually taken from the FIDE Online Olympiad 2020, in which the white here is Grandmaster Faina and the black here is Grandmaster Sukandar, in which Grandmaster Sukandar here plays knight f6. Although on the first move, the black here can try the move knight to c6, and after, for example, c4, g6, trying to develop his bishop into the long track square diagonal. But for example, after d4, e5, in which there is an early skirmish on the center with the pawns, with the knight c6 and knight f3, and after, for example, knight c3, trying to gambit his pawn, so that, for example, after e takes d4 and knight to d5, we shall see this position now that the white still have a compensation for the sacrifice pawn on d4 because he actually control a lot of battle square against the black's camp. And for example, after bishop to g7, trying to defend his extra pawn on the d4, but still there's just a simple bishop to g5, in which it actually attacks the queen on d8. And for example, if the black covered attack from the bishop with knight to e7, but there's just a simple knight takes to d4, in which the white here tries now to regain his pawn deficit, for example, on his position. Even though the white here is actually has a 2 attackers versus 1 defender, and for example, after bishop takes d4, the white here can tries to sacrifice his queen, and by capturing to queen takes d4 with an attack to the rook on h8. Because for example, if the black here capture that queen, but there is a mate in 2 after knight f6 check, and the only move that the black king can go is king f8, but there is bishop h6 checkmate. So there's no cover, there's no capture, there's no escape to the check, so it's already now a checkmate. So going back to the game of Grandmaster Faina versus Grandmaster Sukandar, and after knight c3, knight f6, in which they actually go for a transposition for the opening from Reti opening to English opening after c4, in which Faina here chooses his pit opening, which is the English opening, and Sukandar here defend with the move e6. Going back, although the black here can actually try another move, which is knight to c6, the idea is to control the center with his knights. Even though, for example, the white here can play knight to c3, trying to have a control to this e4 and d5, but there's just simple e5, in which it actually regain his control to the center with his pawn and knight. And for example, after g3, trying to have an obvious control to the light squares. For example, if this bishop will actually be developed on the g2 square, but there's just simple bishop to b4, trying to double the c file for the white's camp. And here, even though the white here escaped that idea from doubling his own c-pawn, he can actually play knight to d5 and tries to attack the black bishop, but there's just simple knight takes to d5. The idea is, for example, after c takes d5, there is actually an attack to the knight on c6. And after, for example, after knight to d4, we shall see in this position now that this pawn is actually undefended because the defender here is actually been moved from the attack of the d5 pawn. But after knight takes to e5, there is a simple queen to e7 that actually attacks the knight on the e5 and indirectly attacks on the king on e1, because if this knight will be moved, for example here, then there is a checkmate. So going back on this position, in which the white here actually plays the move f4, trying to have a loop square on the f2 and also defending his knight, but there is just a simple d6, trying to force the white's knight here to be out of this square, because for example, after knight to d3, there is a queen to e4, in which it actually attacks now the rook on h1. And if the white here escape his rook to g1, but there's just simple queen to e3 again, attacking this rook from this queen. Because this pawn cannot actually capture this queen because it was pinned, and it gives a check to the white's king on e1. So for example, after rook to g2 to escape from the attack of the queen, but there is a mate after knight f3 checkmate. So in just 11 moves, the black here wins through a checkmate. So going back, for example, after knight f3, knight f6, in which Frena here plays c4 and Sukandar play a defense with e6. Frena here plays g3, trying to develop his bishop, and after d5, trying to have a fully control on the light squares on the center. And for example, after Frena plays d4, tries to gambit his pawn on c4 so that he can actually have a diagonal for his bishop on c1. But Sukandar here grabbed the gambited pawn on c4 and wins a pawn on his position. But Frena here actually immediately take it back with queen to a4, a double attack, because there is a check to the king and an attack to this undefended pawn. And Sukandar here defend with a gaffer against the white queen check. And after, for example, queen takes c4, we shall see in this position now that it is actually equal because they actually have an equal amount of pawns and pieces on this position. And Sukandar here plays bishop to c6, and after bishop to g2, tries to develop his bishop and tries to indirectly control the light square on the center, but there is a simple bishop to d5 attacking the queens of Grandmaster Prina. But after queen to c2, again Sukandar here chased the queen of Prina, and after queen to a4 check, giving a check, but there is just a cover for the check, and again attacking this queen with the bishop of Sukandar. And after, for example, queen to c2, but there is just bishop to e4 again, attacking the queen, and they actually both have a triple repetition after queen to a4, bishop to c6, queen c2, bishop to e4, and ends into a drawn game. So going back after knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6, the English opening, and after g3, d5, d4, tries to gambit a pawn, but there's the simple d takes c4, and after the white here immediately tries to win it back with queen e4 check, but there is just simple bishop d7, queen takes, bishop moves, bishop to g2, and after bishop to d5, attacking the queen, queen c2, bishop e4, queen e4 check, bishop c6 covering the check, queen c2, bishop moves, queen moves, and they actually ended in a drawn game through a threefold repetition in just 12 moves. So that's all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and just don't forget to subscribe.